All right, I'll go ahead and begin. And today is one of those exceptions where you shouldn't feel obligated to mute your mic or at least keep it muted, because today isn't a presentation that's very interactive where we, the group here, the audience, will participate in this disaster recovery presentation. And we're lucky to have here today Harry Orell. He's my boss, Elliot's boss. He is the vice president of technology at VPM here in Richmond. And hopefully you guys got to read his pedigree and the invitation. And I think this is a really unique disaster recovery discussion that hopefully has a twist from what you might be used to from your company. So with that said, I'm going to throw it over to Harry. And thanks again for jumping in for this presentation today.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity. Just to provide some context, here at VPM, we're I think a little behind the curve when it comes to disaster recovery planning. We got a lot of know-how, a lot of sort of institutional knowledge that's in Mike and Elliot and Dale's and others' heads, but we haven't always done a very good job of writing these things down. So short time ago, we took a look specifically at climate sort of disasters and using a wealth of knowledge that we received from Blue Ridge Public Radio down in Asheville, North Carolina, where they laid out sort of how they made it through Hurricane Helene, some of their response and recovery steps, some of the lessons that they learned. And we use that to facilitate a back and forth internally that essentially served to, as an ideation session to help sort of prime the pump for future, tabletop exercises and sort of documentation priorities, gaps in our procedures and sort of roles and responsibilities. So Mike and I thought that there might be some value to tailor that a little bit and deliver it to this group as well. So with that, let me go ahead and pull up a Slido presentation. If you are not familiar, Slido is a great cloud-based platform that I feel like, for me at least, has sort of replaced the sort of classic Post-it driven ideation that a lot of teams and companies have done in the past. And this is a great solution when you've got a more distributed team where not everyone's in the same place. So if you guys want to go to slido.com, use the QR code, use your computer, use your phone. I'm going to throw some polls and things at you over the course of the presentation to get the conversation going. So with that, and this information won't disappear, but I'm going to go ahead and kick off the first poll here, and we'll use this as sort of a test, just to sort of calibrate as a group, what the general level of concern is about such an incident, such a disaster. I'll give you guys just a minute to put something in there. Nice. We got a lot of 3s, 4s, and 5s here internally at VPM. I like the confidence represented by the 2. Guys, another minute or two here. Now everybody's got to get set up. There we go. More 2s. This is trending in, at least from my perspective, in a counterintuitive direction. As we collected input on this prompt, the team seemed increasingly concerned. Right. So, yep, perfect. I've got that join information, that QR code will stay consistent here. And then, but I'll go ahead and what we'll do also, just to mention, is that, Mike and we'll extract all this information, both sort of some of these charts, where we're asking to rank things, and then we'll have a couple prompts that are asking for sort of free response, and we'll package all that up and get that sent out to everybody for reference.
All
All
right.
right, I'm going to go ahead and move us here to the next prompt. And so, yeah, just curious to sort of solicit from the team, what our sort of different experiences are. While you guys are doing that, I'll just sort of speak mine. I'm relatively new here to the broadcast industry. I've been at VPM for about 5 years, and I came from software development and financial technology primarily. So most of my DR experience is on the software side. I've had a couple of really severe, widespread malware incidents. One at S&P Global, which affected over 10,000 machines, internationally across a number of offices, and we were facing a fix logistically that required that we put our hands on every single machine, and either with a USB key or a CD, because most people were still operating on desktops at the time. We were popping CDs into these computers, doing a reboot, running a script, and then having to verify the fix. We ended up having to conscript, almost close to 1,000 people across all those offices into the help desk team to get that done. But different sort of size and shape of the situation when you're talking about broadcast operations, for sure. Stuff. Yep. I don't know if anybody else is having running into any issues joining by entering the code in at slido.com, but I had kind of a funny piece of behavior in the web when I was testing things out earlier, and then when I accessed via the QR code, everything sort of worked like magic. So I don't know if there's maybe a hiccup on the Slido end with regard to the entry of that code.
I'm wondering if some people see a reference to VPM that may have been one you didn't. It's like the first slide, and on my computer it's stuck there, but now I have it on my phone and I'm right there with you. So just for anyone else that's experiencing that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Not sure what's causing us that wrinkle here. All right. And I'm going to leave this Slido up and running. So please do continue to enter your information. But while that is running, I'm going to move us to just a quick slide deck where I want to share with you guys what was shared with us for the Blue Ridge Public Radio folks. Let me go back a slide. So Jeff Pope, who is a consultant to the CEO that was working down there, he's known in the public media space as a smart and effective sort of executive consultant and resource. He packaged all this up for us, and I pulled this quote right out of his email because I thought it really drove the point home for the team at VPM here internally. He says, Western North Carolina is widely considered to be one of the more climate change resistant places in North America, and yet about 500,000 did not have power for over a week, and 100,000 will likely not have potable water for another month. And internet and cell service is still spotty. This was maybe 3 weeks, about 2 to 3 weeks after the worst of it. He said, we were not ready for this at all. We had not reviewed or rehearsed our plans and found many gaps as we executed. I can say that is certainly also true of us here at VPM. And so we're trying to take as much benefit from Jeff Pope and the team over at Blue Ridge's experience, try to get out ahead of this before we find ourselves on similar footing. So just to move through what he shared, here are a few notes about the response. When he spoke about the staff contingent that was helping with the response, he described it as 4 reporters, a digital content specialist, and a producer. Now, when I was going through this with our engineering and IT teams, the first thing I said was, he's probably missing a few folks. He's not mentioning any technical support, any sort of administrative support. Something tells me that there were probably additional folks, but I think just him speaking to the audience that he had in focus, he focused here on sort of the content producing and sort of creative side of things. But I would wager that there were probably some hero engineers that were keeping those 4 reporters and that producer humming through this entire experience. But I thought that that would be a good note just to help sort of prompt us again internally to talk about what we think the response team would look like here. They also talk about breaking format, again, which is maybe more of a sort of public media sort of note here. They left behind their NPR content pass through by and large, focused on local. They were doing 12 to 15 hours of local programming, hitting that NPR headline news at the top of the hour. They were doing a lot of two-way conversations, interviews with folks in the city council, folks from emergency response teams, and they found that there was a lot of value in that. They were getting a lot of positive feedback from the community there. And so as they were tackling those conversations, they were recording them, re-airing them at different times to try to cast as wide a net as possible with that information. And additionally, they translated the briefings into Spanish and aired those every evening. I thought this was a particularly salient note for our team here at VPM because I don't think that this would have been necessarily high on our list to consider with regard to our response logistics. But having it put in front of us here by Blue Ridge, I think we agree that there'd probably be a lot of value in talking internally about how would we make something like that happen efficiently if we were in the same situation. And then, they talked about flooding the zone on digital, right? So really leveraging their social channels, leveraging, YouTube where it made sense. And then they also very quickly launched a daily newsletter. We have a number of newsletters here at VPM, and I would say of all of these items, that's probably the bullet point that we're best prepared to handle. I think that, we could probably in a number of hours spin up a newsletter, and as long as we had the copy, we could have that sent out to our members and to our existing subscribers right away. Of course, we would still need to be cautious about the fact that we can't just send a newsletter to everybody whose email address we have. We have to really just focus in on those that have made the conscious effort to subscribe, lest we find our email server getting tagged as a spam and running into walls there. There are also a couple of notes here I thought that were just interesting for us to think about. Jeff mentioned that with power and internet problems across the area, their offices actually became a hub for local journalists and other relevant nonprofit partners. They were able to get their facility power up and running, I think, a little sooner than other areas in the space. But even prior to that, I think they had a more robust power redundancy plan and ISP redundancy that allowed them to get up and running a lot quicker than their peers. And then finally, they concluded that the radio broadcasts were absolutely the most reliable source of information. Again, with cell service taking a big hit during this disaster, terrestrial radio really came in to fill the gap. We're a dual licensee. We've got radio and TV, and I think operationally, there's a lot of focus on our television broadcast, but when we think about our operation through this disaster recovery lens, I think, the radio operations and our planning for logistics there are probably the priority rather than anything that we'd be worried about on TV. Because again, if folks don't have electricity and if folks lose their cell service, that television broadcast is going to drop off in terms of its reliability and who it's getting to pretty fast. They threw out these lessons learned. So these come right out of Jeff's email. Just spin through them real quick. Like I mentioned when we talked about them breaking format on the radio side, all local all the time is what their area needed and what seemed to be the most effective. Other comm systems were down. I mean, the moment that you lose cell service, a lot of those fallbacks and a lot of folks' initial instincts aren't going to get them the information that they're seeking. They had a breaking news emergency protocol that was really focused on news and their radio news team and what they needed to do. But they didn't have a similar plan for the larger operation, for their facilities or for their support teams, which is good for us to think about. Trusted journalism and journalists are critical, especially with the sort of existing climate around misinformation. So they just shared that with us. And then I think this was probably the one that internally we spent the most time chewing on, which is that the lesson that relationships are everything. In a situation like this where the infrastructure the rug's pulled out from under you. It's who you know, it's who you've got stored in your phone, who you can pick up the phone and call for help or for information. And so, we thought that was really salient. That was, I think, part of the initial inspiration for Mike and I to maybe want to bring this to the SBE, because a lot of our sort of actionable partnerships and relationships, there's a convergence of those here on this call for sure. If our area was to get hit like this. Having to fill the airspace was transformational for them in terms of newsroom capacity. Previously, their team had been nervous and resistant about live two-way production, favoring more controlled, produced pieces to meet the quality and listener expectations of their area. This resonated a lot with me. I think we have similar anxiety or apprehension about going live and moving away from those controlled produced pieces. But it was good to have this perspective and for us to think about how would we pull that together, and do we have all of the tools and procedures in place to make that happen. And then finally, just a note, less of a tech note, was that their local and regional funders wanted to help offset the extra costs. I think that, again, more of a salient note for the public media space, but it was good for us to consider. And it definitely is a good prompt to include partners in our development and fundraising team in our disaster recovery planning versus sort of managing that in a technical silo. And then my last slide here that is all of the sort of the gaps and the opportunities for improvement that Jeff outlaid. So these come right out of his email. Some I think were already on our radar, and some were definitely items that we hadn't considered before. Creating schedules for staffing downtime is definitely one of the latter. This is not something that we've put a lot of thought into. I think we operate under an assumption, especially as an engineering team, that when the chips are down and there's a need, folks are going to show up. And by and large, that's true. But I think this gets a little bit more dicey when you start to realize that there is important communication and coordination with our marketing and comms department, with our fundraising team, with our content teams. They needed to not only have that breaking news plan, but they needed to have practiced going into breaking news mode, which was a gap for them, and certainly is for us as well. Staff or having a plan to staff certain critical operations. They said from filling toilets to reporting to food to custodial, everyone needs a place to be. I'll add just one more sort of thought on this, which is that we have, and I think a lot of us in this space, we have a lot of single points of failure where maybe it's just this one engineer or this one IT person who knows how to do X or who has access to this machine or this platform. So I think the note, at least for us internally here, is to not only ensure that we have the plan, but to make sure we have backups for every component of that plan. Mentioned the breaking news plan in place, and we talked about the fact that they also needed to have a facility plan in place. First aid at the station. So certainly they had their little first aid kit, under the sink in the break room. We've got that too. I think what they found is that maybe they needed to have somewhat of a more robust set of supplies or sort of first aid resource to fall back on. And I think the same is true for us. We have a modest fleet of vehicles. And while I'm sure you can probably find a Band-Aid, maybe some Neosporin or Bacitracin in the little kit, I'm not sure that there's much else, and it might be worth us sort of taking a second look or revisiting what sort of supplies in that category are, stored here at the facility, stored at our broadcast sites, stored in those fleet vehicles, so that if we found ourselves in a situation like this where the risk and the danger was escalating, we'd have a little bit more peace of mind that we'd be able to respond and take care of emergencies on the spot. They talked about the lack of testing. So, and the way that they phrased it is that their ambition now is to test plans twice a year for all staff, 4 times a year for their senior staff. Ours is a high turnover industry, so having institutional knowledge sink in and stay is critical. Very much agree. Backup power. I think they felt like they were good on that. I think we feel like we're in pretty good shape on that. But backup water and food was an interesting one for us to ponder. What backup provisions are there, if any, at our broadcast sites or here at the HQ? It's definitely something to think about. Planning for mental health support should be done well ahead of time. Again, probably not something that lands in the lap of the engineering and IT teams, but worth mentioning for sure. And then he mentioned their telemetry, that they had 19 facilities and that was helpful, but that it was sometimes limited. And they were able to call their listeners and ask if they were on the air. I thought that last point was an interesting one for us to consider, and maybe it's worth sort of formalizing some liaisons in our member community that we might be able to call on to say, hey, let us know, what are you seeing or what are you hearing on the radio out in Harrisonburg or outside of Charlottesville, or, somewhere in the Shenandoah Valley where we have a little less direct line of sight from where we are here in Richmond. So that was what we got from Jeff. We really appreciated that. And it, prompted us to have this conversation here at VPN. And so with that, I want to take us back to the Slido, where I'm going to throw a few additional prompts at you guys, and we'll maybe make more of an effort here as we move forward to see what conversation these spawn. So first, just to level set as a group, I'd love to reframe that initial concern ranking prompt and ask you guys how well you feel like your organization and team are for a climate disaster of this sort of nature. One in which the utility of roadways is compromised, cell service, ISP, widespread power outage. Yeah, so we'll get a sense of where we all stand. And humbly, I think I gotta couch us here at VPM in the sort of 1 to 3 section, probably on the lower end. And I think our internal efforts around disaster recovery this year are definitely aimed at getting us more into that 4 and 5 territory when it comes to a prompt like this. Yeah. 5. I'm jealous.
Yeah.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Good deal. All right, let me move here. Well, let me give me just a couple seconds. See if we get a few more.
Hey, I was going to mention that it would be neat at some point to find out what some people can share in this group, that, why they're at a 5 or 4, and maybe how they've provisioned through their company to get to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please please feel free to speak up at any point here. Because we're in the next thing is definitely going to get us to what Mike and I hope will be a bit of a back and forth in conversation. So, all right, I'm going to move. We're pretty evenly distributed, at least for what we can see here. So, as I mentioned, difficult if not impassable roads, loss of cellular service, widespread loss of power, flooding, severe winds, debris. Curious about what your organization or team's top priorities would be in the event of a disaster of this nature. And I think, again, just to let you guys know sort of what bubbled to the top here when we did this internally at VPM, it was really the radio operation and the integrity of that signal and broadcast that rose to the top. And in response to that insight, I think the first real disaster recovery tabletop exercise that we're going to execute is going to be one in which we invite our content partners, some other folks around the organization, and we sort of sit down and split into teams and really work out logistically what does sort of keeping the radio operation moving and what does maybe adjusting the size and shape of that operation to fit the needs of the time. What's that look like? And how do we get that sort of proceduralized for us? Getting information to the public. I like that. And feel free if you have a thought, but you're not on the Slido, just let us know. Speak up. Happy to hear what folks think. Is at the top of the list here. I think another theme for us is that we realized as we were generating these ideas that we are so reliant on cellular communication and on cellular data to be the backup. And so when you take that away, we realize that there are some pretty critical gaps. We do not, for example, currently have like a POTS telephone line with a voicemail that Mike or I can configure that everyone knows to call into, where we can say, hey, if you're able, please come to the office, around this time, or please check in with so and so. That was the way to do it. Not so long ago, but I think now with the SMS texting and with the comfort level we have that, well, as long as someone can get to an internet device, they'll be able to get to their email. Everything's cloud-based, nothing's reliant on on-prem systems. But you start to take away some of those communication channels, and you realize that maybe we do still need the fallback of sort of the old school snow day line, right, where all the parents would call in to see if school was delayed or canceled, rather than getting a text the way that they do today. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, to that point, I'd like to point, the last storm that hit in Florida, they were talking where it was coming on the West Coast. A lot of people ended up getting flooded, and after the storm and communications came back up, they then got text saying they needed to evacuate. So exactly that. I mean, everybody relies way too much on that. People have, I think probably us and probably people of our generation and a little older, we like to listen to TV and the radio and not, maybe not be so reliant on that. But I know a lot of people had that issue.
Yeah, absolutely. We were, discussion about, leveraging, ATSC 3.0, came up, and like, what can we do with that technology? And, as I think that there are some things that can be done, but there's also, an unfortunate reality that the consumer electronics space is really not moving at a pace that we would need it to be, to rely on our, average listener to have access to an ATSC 3 signal, or our average viewer, as the case might be. Okay, so I will move this forward. This was one that really got us sort of talking. There was a kind of a fun, argumentative sort of quality of the output of this. So I asked everybody to rank the following based on their level of concern from highest to lowest, considering our current infrastructure capabilities and redundancy. And so probably should have changed the word our to your for this version of this, but I included here ISP service, facility power, TV broadcast, radio broadcast, facility office access, remote operations, team communications, partners and service providers, business IT, and broadcast site reliability. And this led to some healthy disagreement about what was the real priority list here in terms of concern. So I give you guys a minute to either throw your ranking in here, or to maybe just speak up if you have a thought about, if does any of these feel like the most sort of fundamental or existential? Does anything seem totally negligible? Very clearly bottom of the list. I was worried about my systems administrators' feelings a little bit for a moment there, but business IT plummeted pretty darn fast to the bottom of the stack here. It seems like we can probably live without Outlook and Slack if we have to. All right, we'll join you guys on this one. All right, great. My horse in the race is ISP service. I was because I just coming from business IT primarily, it feels like that is for me selfishly, it's definitely where my mind goes immediately. But this is looking an awful lot like the ranking that we landed on as well. with broadcast site reliability, radio broadcast very high, team communications up in the top half of the list. Yeah. And, for some of these, the sort of the context for each of us individually, and for our teams, is so important. So like for us, remote operations fell pretty low down this list, but not because it's not critical, but because we don't have particularly robust remote operations. There's an awful lot that requires that we get here on site to take care of. And, we're trying to work on that, try to move the dial in the right direction on that. I want us to be a little bit more capable remotely, but right now it's just not the thing. And then, there was some, so we're tied between facility power and ISP service. Yep. And I think that's probably, honestly, those two, at least for VPM, of all of the things on this list, that's probably where our investment for redundant systems is, right? So we have multiple ISPs, we have backup generator power. So, that existing investment is reflective of the sort of high priority and concern around those areas. Good stuff. Let's see. Yep, business IT, where it belongs, down here at the bottom. I was actually, for us internally, I was surprised, just like the group here, partners and service providers was relatively low on the list, which is actually heartening for me because there are times where I feel like we are so dependent on our partners and service providers that I worry that, if we can't get, Gates Air or, Verizon or whomever it is on the phone, that we're going to be up a creek without a paddle. But I felt like as we pulled on that thread, the team made me feel a lot better that, well, no, we're actually a bit more autonomous and capable, just the team here ourselves.
And I think in years past, we've learned that we can't always rely on the vendors with propane to fill our generator fuel tanks, that if we have diesel, we can help ourselves in a pinch. So yeah, that's what it's all about.
Yep. Well, good deal. Well, let me move us here towards the end. So this is the last prompt I'll put up. So sort of take your time, but just a solicitation of any additional sort of thoughts. And like I said, whether you type it into the slider or you just want to speak up and let us know your thoughts, I think Mike and I are, interesting. If there's anything that any advice that any of you have to impart, knowing that us here at VPM, that we're in the sort of early throes of this sort of effort. We're trying to look at the NIST cybersecurity framework as a sort of a guiding model, and it talks about response, recovery, protection, mitigation, and we're trying to make sure that both from an IT and a broadcast operations perspective, that we're checking as many boxes for best practices as we can. And, maybe following through a little bit more than we have in the past on sort of the administrative component. Because again, it's not that my team doesn't know what to do. It's that we haven't written it down. And so when that team changes gradually year over year, I worry that some of that knowledge is going to go out the door. And we're going to have to start to figure out some of these things from a blank slate, which, is not what we want. We want to feel like we're definitely benefiting from, all of the knowledge and experience that our existing, well-seasoned team is bringing to the table.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to hear what some other companies, if companies are taking it to this extent or even further. I'm really curious between the two markets.
Yeah, it really hurts, so to speak, to get it all set up. But once it's set up, it's really nice. We've done, disaster. You can look at disasters from multiple directions. Ransomware, that's a disaster. Your studio building falls down, that's a disaster. We actually called it was a disaster preparedness document within the company here, and we even go down and list out, it's like a minimum of 2 vendors that you can get generators from, electricians, all of these people that you may need whenever this stuff hits the fan. That way you're not having to find this information. It just takes so much longer, especially when all the chaos is happening, to do that. And with the company, with Radio One, we've actually started doing requests from CISA. It's the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. We get, access coordination requests from them, meaning, a lot of times when things go bad, they don't even want people on the road, so they start snatching you up if they see you on the road. So this letter shows that you should be out there. You're working with communications, which is a vital thing in those situations. It's supposed to help you as far as getting services like diesel, propane, stuff like that. It's supposed to knock you up the list, but the problem is most companies don't care. I've been in situations many times, and they're just like, "Yeah, we'll put you on the list. We'll get to you when we can." And when you tell them you have this, there's no downside for them to ignore you. It's just they're going to go business as usual and keep doing what they do. We even got it down to the point where, the biggest disasters we would actually be broadcasting from our transmitter sites. Have it set up to where we'll have backup automation systems ready to go, so we can broadcast and do what we need to do there. I mean, bring out a kit, somebody needs to plug in a microphone and talk there, they can do that too. So it's a really deep dive. There's so many what ifs out there that you could sit there and waste a whole week trying to think of a what if, but it's good. It's good to think about it. It's good to write it all down. It's good to have a plan in place so you can reference all of that.
Yeah, I appreciate
And
you mentioning the cybersecurity and infrastructure security
yes,
agency. It's a little bit leans more IT, of course, but we have found that it's just a huge wealth of information. And one thing that I'll point out is that they've got under their resources section, if you look at the exercises, this sort of they've got a few sort of frameworks for some of their exercises, and we found that those are really great for sort of jump starting. Again, we're a team that hasn't done a lot of these, and so sort of following the path. And I was having a hard time finding it, but we actually registered for a game. I mean, they sent us, it was free. We just had to sort of register and I guess qualify at some level, but they sent us a large sort of board game that, it's like an afternoon sort of cyber threat workshop that we're looking forward to sort of running the team through sometime in the new year.
yeah, they have a lot of knowledge on that site.
Hey, and by the way, don't forget everyone, the VAB offers as a service, at least statewide, if your company sends a request, especially if you're a VAB member, I don't know if that's mandatory or not, but many of us are, that you can get a first responder card, which I have in my pocket. And this is the month we're supposed to get that information to Christina Sandridge at the VAB for the upcoming year. They will, because it takes them a while to get it up and running. Thanks. Yeah, you got the card. Chris has his card out there. Yeah. So tis the year. I mean, tis the month to get rolling on that, which Harry, I'm doing that for Jamie now. She gave me that task last year and I'm already putting together a list.
Excellent.
Any other experiences from other companies? I'm really eager to hear some feedback.
I can tell you, Chris, at WHRO, we have a very extensive disaster recovery plan. It not only details natural disasters, but covers everything from chemical to biological to fire to whatever it may be. And if it's not over 150 pages, you don't have a full disaster recovery in place yet. It takes a huge amount of work putting that together and just basically maintaining it every year. We start in May. Just getting all the contacts from one year to the next year. Even everybody loves staying in PBS. We find out that the people that need it, journalists, things of that nature, actually, flip out pretty quick. So, make sure that you're keeping a very documented plan. It helps out too, because it actually, the better your disaster recovery plan, the better that looks for your insurance company. Sorry about that. The better that looks on your insurance company, is much more favorable for that. For those that are PBS folks, we do have a cybersecurity working group at PBS. So you can join that, and I advise you to, because we have several folks on all the time, going over different things, but, from agency folks that from CISA, from the FBI, they come in, they talk about it, all the normal stuff. And you can also join CISA and have them run a lot of, free stuff too. But it's very extensive, and you just got to make sure you cover all your bases. I would always advise you to use the same, like fuel oil company, use the same people over and over, because that actually gets on their priority list as well. Most of them will call us beforehand, especially if it's, a natural, a hurricane, or, even a bad nor'easter down here can, create some havoc. They'll call us ahead of time, say, hey, you want to top everything off? And sometimes I say yes, and sometimes I say I don't want to spend that 10 grand because I'm not sure. Yeah, big
Hey,
generators, big fuel tanks.
Chris, I wanted to ask, your plan, I'm sure it includes a plan for who to reach out to in the community, the 7 cities in your region and beyond. It has all the contact info and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. We have individual contacts for everybody, every EOC. We actually have a network that's still operational. We test it every once in a while, but usually out of hurricane season. But we can actually pick up phones and talk to anybody at any of the EOCs as well, which does make that. But that was set up back when HRPDC back in 2000, and pretty much after Isabel. So it's 2005, 2006 that the HR TACRAN, the Hampton Roads Tactical Area Network, was set up to actually have everybody with the ability to communicate effectively during those types of emergency situations. Made a big difference. We tried to tie it in originally to our internet, because we had pretty stout internet connections at that time, and they didn't want to do that. But as soon as Isabel and some of the other ones after Isabel hit, and their internet went down because of tree fade or root fade, as the case may be in a lot of situations. Like, okay, yeah, you can tie that in now. So work with your cities and your governments, and it takes a long time to get in that those positions, and it takes a long time to be that trusted partner. But once you're there, you at least have access to potentially get generator replacements and stuff like that. There's never any operational funds for anything, which sucks. That by far the worst part is that they can give you all the equipment in the world, but when it really comes down to it, you're trying to get the operational cost for maintaining those generators, for maintaining the fuel and everything else, and that's always the hard part with any of these situations.
Great. Well, thanks.
More than willing to share our DR. Well, a lot of it, some of it has a lot of personal phone numbers and stuff like that. But if everybody wants it, I'm more than happy to share it with people. So, all right.
I'll be in touch, Chris.
Okay.
That would be great, because, I'm thinking, we take care of ourselves, right? But in our meeting that we had where we were working on these plans, I'm all about the SBE and supporting one another and the broadcast community. And I got to saying, well, what's to stop us from having an alliance with WHRO, especially you guys being on the coast? But it doesn't matter. We can get hit by a tropical storm and we look worse than the Virginia Beach area.
Oh, yeah.
And we just help one another out and have alliances.
Well, now that's where you look at it too. I mean, the odd thing is that we could have the brunt of the force, storm winds come in here, but we're only 20 feet above sea level, so we got to worry about the flooding stuff. But the winds usually aren't too bad. The further you go up inland, your elevation starts going, and so you get into a lot more of the brunt force storm force winds. And we kind of noticed that too with Isabel, that the winds we had here, like Driver and some of those ones, weren't as bad as like Charles City, which is 1,000 feet elevation ish, 700 feet elevation before it gets to it. And the winds up there were much stronger than at that tower.
Isabel is the example. I was living in Virginia Beach. I went to be with my father here in Richmond. We were hit harder in Richmond and my wife had to stay behind in Virginia Beach. It wasn't nearly as bad.
Yeah. That we noticed the exact same thing with the winds elevation. The higher you are, the worse it can be. Yeah, and you kind of see that with mountains. As these storms go in, they have all the winds when they're saying 150 miles an hour aren't at sea level. Those are elevated storm winds. And the higher you go up, you know, the worse it can get, and the worse it can get quickly.
Yeah. Anyone else with some feedback? This is great.
I just have a random thought. It might be worth like investing in bonding technology. Like usually we buy like cellular bonding devices, but I mean you can kind of we can bond like several different types of internet, like satellite, local, and cell on the one thing. It's a good way to back up if various internet sources are down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would advise you. I mean, the more you can afford to put in for internet, the better it's going to be. You know, multiple carriers, multiple routes, multiple, you know, ways to get things in and out is going to help you out in the long run. You know, it's a little bit of work to set up. You know, if you're setting up BGP and some of the other stuff for peering and, you know, everything else that goes along with setting up multiple internet connections is, you know, it's complicated. But the more you do that, the better off you're going to be, and more likely you are to, you know, maintain service. We have multiple serial, you know, everybody in the building doesn't have the same carrier. So even though we have a lot of people with cell phone, you know, from the company, we have, you know, a combination of Verizon, you know, T-Mobile, and AT&T, and they're all in the back on the tower. So, you know, if something happens to them, I can provide power to their equipment to make sure that they stay up. You know, now it's not as bad now because most of them actually have been putting generators in over the course of years. But when Isabel came through, you know, we were running large, you know, plugs over to things to make sure that AT&T and, you know, at that point Verizon, which were the only ones on the main part of the tower out back, make sure they stayed up and operating. You know, which, you know, they were happy for, and we were happy for because we could still, you know, communicate. Luckily, that wasn't, you know, a crazy quote unquote storm here, but you know, it could be.
Mhm. All right. Any other comments before we wrap it up, or did you have anything else to add, Harry?
No, I think that's it. Thanks for letting me go through that with you guys. Appreciate it. I appreciate all the thoughts. Absolutely. I've made a few notes here, Chris, based on some of the things that you'd said that Mike and I will definitely put our heads together to follow up on.